you must not eat of it, therefore you will surely, or otherwise you'll surely get sick. It was, then it became a temptation. Just, I wanted to know what it was like. And I hope I'm not tempting any of you right now with it. There's a strawberry version too that some people like. But the point is, it's like a lot of sin that we it starts out as something, well, this is not that. Maybe think it's good. You think it's good. But then you start to get in a pattern of sin. You recognize that it's not good, but you do it anyway. You recognize that there's something about it that you, like, the first one that came to mind, the first sin that came to mind was I was preparing for this is lust. It starts out, yeah, I want this. This is something I can have. It sounds good. It feels good, tastes good, whatever. Therefore, I should have it. But then it becomes, well, this is something I've never tried before. This is something new. This is something different. And for the very reason that it's attainable and that you don't have it, that's why you want it. And that's when the problem gets worse and worse, because it's like the Charleston Chew. It doesn't offer anything better than all the other options. It's the same price. But for some reason we go after it, and whether it's because we think it tastes good or because simply it's something we want to experience that's new and different. I think that's what happens with Eve here, is because it's new and it's different, and he convinces her that it's going to give her something that she doesn't have already. Whether that something is good, it doesn't really factor in. He tries to sell it as good. He tries to sell it as she's going to get some kind of knowledge that she doesn't have, that God has, that she should want. And unfortunately, she goes for it, and it's not as good as she thought. Verse 6. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. So Eve took the fruit, Adam took it too, and the serpent had deceived them into thinking they were going to get something that they didn't. So whose fault was it? Was it the woman's? Was it the man's? Was it the serpent's? Yes, yes, and yes. I mean, if you're deceived, is it really your fault? If the con artist deceives you, is it your fault? Certainly not, right? I mean, I was deceived. That's a tough one. But the truth is everybody who does something wrong is at fault. The serpent was at fault, Eve was at fault, and Adam was at fault. They were all wrong, for even if it was just for being deceived. That they were wrong. Eve, she was convinced and she was deceived into thinking that there was something out there that she didn't have that she needed. She wasn't smart enough. She didn't have the knowledge that she should have had. She wasn't beautiful enough. She wasn't as beautiful and wonderful as God intended her to be. There was something more out there that she needed, and she was wanting it. She thought she needed something more, and that was what got her. With Adam, he just took the fruit. Didn't even stand up. Didn't become the husband, the superhero husband, the man that he should have been, the leader that he should have been, and stand up and do something masculine and strong. Instead, he just like, sure. I mean, she's given it. It's free. Take it. And that's the problem. We are deceived into thinking those things, and therefore we're at fault. And so verse 7, it said their eyes were opened, and they realized they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves and made coverings for themselves. So that knowledge that they gained, that they wanted, didn't turn out to be such good knowledge. They didn't gain wisdom at all. They gained shame. It wasn't self-awareness that they got, that they were seeking, and they were seeking after some kind of self-awareness and enlightenment. They didn't get that. They got self-consciousness. They realized they were naked. It was not a good thing. They didn't get the enlightenment. They got just a bunch of lies, and they had to live with those lies and the consequences, and it just got bad. And if it was left at that, man, the world would be a bad place. But fortunately, there's an intervention here in verse 8. Then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And they hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. But the Lord God called to the man, "Where are you?" What if God had not pursued them? Think about how bad the world would be. Think about if a child ran away from his parents and the parents didn't pursue the child. Nah, so what? I mean, think about how horrible that would be. Yet God, thanks be to God, we have a loving Father, Creator, who comes after us. He pursues us. He pursues the sinner. And that's where the hope begins. This is the first time God ever has to punish the child. He can't just ignore it. He can't just say, they did something bad, we'll just look over it, it's just the first time. He actually has to go through the process that all parents have to go through with their first child, thinking, oh gosh, I have to punish my child who's so cute, I don't want to punish him. We thought about my son Dominic and how he, I guess all kids do this, they reach for the things they're not supposed to reach for, the electrical socket, and we had to punish him because we needed him to not do that anymore. It's understandable. And Sarah and I debated about, how should we do this? What's the best way? We ended up, I think, putting him in his crib, and that worked out pretty well. But it was a tough decision, and it was a decision made out of love, and we did it because we had to. And so God has to do this. For the first time in all of history, he has to deal out punishment, and it's out of love, and he does it because he knows what's best for them. Yet, they hide from him. He says, where are you? They hide from him. And they hide in the bush, it says in verse somewhere. They would rather be hiding in a bush than walking through the garden in the cool of the day with their Father, with their loving Creator. They're in a bad place. What they did was put them in a bad place. And it wasn't so much about that they had done a bad thing that's going to cause them further harm, kind of like touching the electrical socket. What it was is it ultimately broke that relationship that was so pure and so perfect and so loving. And it broke it to where they didn't want to be around him anymore. They didn't feel comfortable around him anymore like they did before. And that's a big problem. Verse 10, he answered, I heard you in the garden and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. And here's where the very first blame game in all of history begins. Kind of like what we saw in that silly video. And he said, who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from? The man said, the woman you put here with me. Notice he gets both of them in one little fail swoop. He says, the woman who you put here with me caused me the problem. She gave me some fruit from the tree and I ate it. Then the Lord God said, I can't believe God didn't just whack Adam right then and there for doing that. Adam was wrong to do that. But the Lord is patient and loving, and he turns to Eve and said, the Lord God said to the woman, what is this you have done? The woman said, the serpent deceived me and I ate. It's not my fault. The serpent deceived me. And the serpent deceived her, and it was his fault. But she was at fault too, and Adam was at fault too. They play the blame game. They pass it down the line and not taking responsibility for their guilt. It's important that you do that. It's important that you take responsibility for your guilt. By the way, notice how God approaches them. Similar to the serpent comes with a question, God comes with a question. Except God's question is not intended to deceive or to manipulate or to convince them of anything. It's not to convince them that he's right and they're wrong, although he is right and they are wrong. But the point of the question was to restore the relationship. He says, where are you? It's not, so what do you think about healthcare? What do you think about the economy? Where somebody goes up to somebody and asks, that question because they want to tell you what they think. They've got an opinion. They got a strong opinion, and they want to get it out. And so they say, hey, what do you think about this? That's what the serpent does. That's not what God does. God says, where are you? I'm looking for you. It's more like, how are you doing? I want to spend some time with you. That's the kind of God that we're dealing with here. Hebrews 12:10 says, our fathers disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good, that we may share in his holiness. God does not discipline us because he needs us to behave or he wants us to behave. And we as parents, those of us who are parents, this is what we do, and it's not necessarily a bad thing to do to try to get our kids to behave. And that verse in Hebrews says that parents do what they can. They do their best job. But God's purpose for disciplining us is that we may share in his holiness, that we get to be with him, that we get to share his holiness with him, walking through the garden like it was intended, rather than hiding in a bush like Adam and Eve had to do after they ate the fruit. God's not out there to try to make us behave. He's out there to try to restore the relationship so that when we're walking with him, behavior happens. And it's a much more beautiful thing.